I was elbow deep in a vendor portal, trying to reconcile 3 different invoices for the same pallet of pressure sensors, when my boss leaned over my cube like a seagull hunting fries. "No way we're paying for your little vacation," he smirked, flicking my travel request back onto my keyboard. "A $1,500 trip to sit across from our largest client, Soliton Dynamics, and keep a wobbly contract from tipping over." Apparently that was a beach day in his head. Vacation. That's what he called the only face-to-face we'd been offered in months. I smiled the way women in middle management are trained to smile. All teeth, no heat, and said, "Understood." Then I rerouted a shipment that would have stalled our Denver line, soothed a carrier, sweet-talked a broker, and drafted the escalation email he'd paste into his nightly leadership update. He'd CC the board and I'd get a thumbs-up emoji. That was the exchange rate here. Soliton wasn't a flashy logo. They didn't host yacht parties or post drone shots of their HQ, but their modules powered nearly half of our top-selling product line. Their account was the quiet backbone that paid for the espresso machine marketing forgot to budget. And lately, they were nervous. 3 late deliveries, 1 technical support ticket that sat in purgatory for 12 days, 1 just checking in from their COO that read in corporate like, "Are you asleep at the wheel?" I'd been the voice on every late-night call. I knew the names of their line managers, their kids, their allergy schedules. Soliton asked for a short in-person reset. 2 days, 1 factory walk, 1 negotiation. I built a case. $1,500 for an economy seat, a mid-range hotel, and the kind of eye contact you can't attach to an email. I attached risk analysis, forecasts, then the sentence that should have sealed it. "This is the last low-cost intervention before they shop alternatives." My boss, Mason, laughed. "They're not going anywhere," he said, and turned back to a slide titled Relationship Excellence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in the same slacks I'd worn since 6 a.m., listening to my neighbor's dog yodel at nothing. My laptop glowed with flight options and a blinking cursor in an unsent email. I reread Mason's denial. I reread Soliton's "We value continuity." I thought about my team. Good people who thought my ability to fix things was magic, not muscle. The next morning, I asked Mason if he'd at least join the video call Soliton had offered as a consolation. He waved a hand like he was dusting crumbs. "Ellen, send them a deck. Charts." They love charts. Soliton didn't love charts. They loved people who showed up when it mattered. That afternoon, I called Priya, our account lead on paper and my ally in reality. "If we don't show, they'll set a date with Starkline," she said softly. I stared at the request denial on my screen. The word vacation pulsed like a bruise. "Then we show," I said. "Approved?" she asked. "Not exactly." So I booked the trip myself. Coach seat, middle row, hotel that promised continental breakfast, and delivered beige bread. I filed PTO for 2 days and attached a tidy industry conference itinerary I built in Canva at midnight. I ordered 100 cheap business cards that said, "Ellen Ward, Vendor Relations Consultant." Not a lie. Just unshackled accuracy. Before I clicked purchase, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Photos from a plant audit. The one where Soliton's maintenance chief lost his father mid-shift and I covered his line, hairnet and all, so he could drive to the hospital. A thank you note from their COO. Handwritten, "You were there when there was nothing in it for you." I'd kept it, not because I'm sentimental, but because memory is flimsy and proof matters. The day before I flew out, I walked into Mason's office with a 1-pager. No color, no swoops. "Soliton is at risk," I said. "If they leave, we miss our quarterly and we don't get them back." "Ellen," he sighed. "Fear-based selling is tacky." "It's math," I said. He smiled at his reflection in the shelf glass and called it leadership. Walking back to my desk, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, calibration. The click into place when you realize the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. And you can either keep feeding it your weekends, or you can rewrite where your effort lands. That night, I packed a carry-on, two blazers, flats that didn't punish ankles, the handwritten note, and a printed copy of our service-level history with every red circle I couldn't ignore. I slept badly. Not because I was scared, because I was done being polite about the cost of silence. Soliton's lobby smelled like solvent and apples. Their COO, Marin, met me with a tight smile that softened when she saw my face instead of a Zoom tile. "You came," she said. "Of course," I answered. We walked the line. We listened more than we talked. We didn't sell anything. We fixed small things and scheduled time for big things. Over coffee in a windowless room, Marin slid a folder toward me. Inside, a letter addressed to our CEO. Not a threat, a mirror. It detailed exactly what they needed to stay and what they'd do if we didn't show them we could hear. "Do you want me to courier this?" I asked. "No," she said. "I want you to hand it to the person who actually shows up." On the flight home, I watched a cloud seem the color of a bruise and thought about the sentence I would underline if anyone asked what this story is about. People don't leave companies. They leave the feeling of not mattering. Back at my desk 2 days later, no one asked where I'd been. Mason bragged about a positive touch point he'd had with Soliton. He winked at me like we'd done it together. A week later, the CEO unfolded a letter in front of the board. His expression froze. He passed it to legal. The lawyer looked up and asked one question. "Where is she?" The morning after Soliton handed me that folder, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation. Marin hadn't raised her voice, hadn't threatened. She'd simply looked at me across a chipped conference table, slid the letter forward, and said, "We need to know someone is listening." That stuck. Not the details of the letter, though those were sharp enough to slice through our entire quarterly forecast. But the tone. Calm, inevitable, like a tide coming in whether you had a bucket or not. By the time I landed back in Ohio, I'd read the letter 5 times. It was precise. Delivery failures logged by date and time. Service lapses tied to production costs. A closing paragraph that spelled out their next steps if we didn't respond. Starkline and Auron, 2 competitors we couldn't afford to lose ground to. And the signature at the bottom, not Marin, not the COO, but Soliton's CEO. I tucked the folder into the bottom of my carry-on under a half-empty bag of pretzels and went back to work like nothing had happened. No one noticed I'd been gone. My calendar showed 2 days of PTO marked personal, and that was enough for Mason. He was already pacing the floor with his phone pressed to his ear, rehearsing his Q3 resilience pitch for the board. I slid into my desk, answered 3 vendor emails, and opened the Soliton folder again just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter spread out beside a mug of tea I never drank. My dog snored under the chair. I tried to picture how this would play out if I handed it to Mason. He'd skim the first paragraph, maybe the second, and then spin it into a bullet point for his PowerPoint deck. Client communication ongoing. He'd write, minor stability concerns. He wouldn't see it for what it was. A warning shot. The next morning, I slipped the letter into a plain manila envelope, wrote confidential across the front, and slid it into my tote. I told myself I'd wait for the right moment. Board meetings always carried a haze of noise. Charts, jargon, people talking just to prove they belonged in the room. Maybe, I thought, if the letter arrived when the noise was loudest, the silence afterward would be deafening. But even before the board meeting, the tension around Soliton was growing. Priya stopped by my desk one afternoon, eyes darting. "Did you hear? Soliton's COO canceled next month's webinar." No explanation. I nodded like it was news, though the weight of the letter pressed against my tote under the desk. "Maybe they're busy." "Or maybe," she whispered, "they're looking somewhere else." Mason strutted through the office later that day, announcing, "Don't worry about Soliton. They're steady. I've got it under control." His grin was wide, but his voice cracked on steady. It was surreal, knowing what I knew, holding in my bag the evidence that contradicted every word he said. For years, I'd been the one patching holes before anyone noticed the leaks. Now, for the first time, I wasn't patching. I was waiting. 2 days before the quarterly board meeting, Mason called a prep huddle. 10 of us crammed into a glass-walled room, our reflections hovering behind us like tired ghosts. He clicked through slides, growth charts in gradient blue, bullet points in Comic Sans. This, he said, is how we prove stability, relationships, trust, vision. I sat there, silent, thinking of Soliton's CEO writing, "If we don't see change, we will transition all orders to Starkline by the first quarter." When the meeting ended, Mason patted me on the shoulder. "Nice work, Ellen." Thanks for the background numbers background. That was what he called the only thing holding the company's supply line together. On the morning of the board meeting, I dressed carefully. Navy blazer, flats, hair pulled back. Professional, unremarkable. I wanted to blend in until the moment I didn't. The boardroom smelled of coffee and new carpet. Suits filed in with their phones buzzing, assistants whispering in the doorway. Mason stood at the head of the table, chest puffed, laser pointer in hand. "Legacy client relationships are stronger than ever," he began, clicking to a slide that showed a line graph pointing skyward. "Soliton remains fully aligned. We anticipate another 2 years of steady growth." My throat tightened. My tote sat at my feet. The envelope inside. Halfway through the presentation, a courier knocked on the glass door. Tan envelope in hand. Thick, stamped, unmistakably official. The receptionist whispered to the CEO, who took the envelope, puzzled. He opened it, unfolded the letter, and went pale. Silence spread like ink in water. He read once, then again. Finally, he slid it across the table to the lawyer. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, eyes scanning fast, then slow. His jaw clenched. He looked up, scanning faces, and asked a question that made my pulse thunder. "Where is she?" I didn't move. Not yet. My tote was still closed, the second copy of the letter still hidden inside. But in that moment, the balance shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. And Mason? He had no idea his vacation had just walked into the boardroom. The lawyer's question hung in the air like a fire alarm that hadn't decided whether to scream. "Where is she?" Mason blinked, followed the lawyer's gaze down the table, and found me. His expression twitched. Surprise first, then calculation. "Ellen?" he said, as if he'd stumbled onto a stranger in his kitchen. The CEO motioned to the empty chair beside him. "Miss Ward, would you join us for a moment?" I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked forward. My tote felt heavier than it was. I sat, set the bag by my feet, and folded my hands. The letter lay between the CEO and the lawyer like a live wire. "Ms. Ward," the lawyer said, voice even. "Did you attend a meeting with Soliton Dynamics last week?" "Yes." "On company business?" Mason jumped in. Too fast. "She was on PTO," he added with a thin smile as if that settled it. The lawyer didn't look at him. "Did you meet with their COO?" "Yes," I said. "At their request." "What was discussed?" "Performance, missed deliveries. Their timeline if we didn't correct course." The CEO tapped the letter. "This timeline?" I glanced at the header. Soliton letterhead. Dated. Signed. "Yes." Mason let out a soft laugh that didn't land anywhere. "Let's not be dramatic. We've had hiccups, sure, but our relationship with Soliton is—" "Please," the CEO said, not looking at him. "Not now." He turned to me again. "Why weren't we informed of this meeting?" "I requested approval for a short trip," I said. $1,500, flights, hotel. It was denied. The room shifted, small movements, the kind people make when they're trying not to be seen reacting. Mason sat straighter. "We denied a vacation request," he said. "This isn't the forum for—" "It wasn't a vacation," I said. Not loud, just clear. It was the least expensive way to keep our largest client from moving their orders. The lawyer slid a copy of the letter to me. Is this the one you saw? It is. I have a duplicate. I reached into my tote, placed my copy next to his. Same folds, same signature, same closing paragraph. We will initiate transition to Starkline in the first quarter unless we see immediate, measurable change. The CEO leaned back, hands together, face pale in a way that made him look older. Why did they send this to me directly? He asked the table, though no one answered. Then to me, why did they trust you with it? I thought of the plant audit years ago, of covering a line so someone could leave to say goodbye to his father, of calling at midnight instead of emailing in the morning. Because I show up, I said. We all do in operations, but faces matter when things wobble. Priya, seated along the wall, shifted a notebook in her lap, saying nothing. She knew the ledger as well as I did, where people had quietly paid with weekends to keep lines running. The lawyer nodded toward the graphs frozen on the wall. Your slide says Soliton is fully aligned for 2 more years, he said to Mason. On what basis? Mason opened his hands. On the basis of long history and my conversations with their team. With whom? The lawyer asked. Emails. Calls. Their procurement. His certainty frayed. Look, this letter is posturing. They always posture before Q4, the CEO's jaw tightened. Then why does it include dates and chargebacks we didn't contest? Why does it list response times from our help desk? Why does it reference a video call you didn't attend? Mason didn't have an answer. He pivoted. If Ellen felt this was urgent, she could have escalated to me instead of freelancing. I kept my eyes on the CEO. I did escalate. Twice. I also handed you a 1-pager. The trip was cheaper than the penalty for 1 missed truck. Silence, then the soft tap of the CEO's pen on the table. How much would it cost us if Soliton shifts volume to Starkline? Conservatively? I said. 7 figures this quarter. More next, once secondary suppliers adjust lead times. We'll spend double to win it back if we can. Can we? He asked. I exhaled. If we act now, yes. Their letter isn't a door closing. It's a door propped open with a brick and a note. We're tired of talking to a wall. They want a person accountable. They want a plan with dates, names, and penalties on our side, not just theirs. The lawyer angled his head. And you believe you can recover this? I believe we can, if we stop pretending charts fix relationships. I paused. They asked to meet the person who actually shows up. I did. They gave me this to make sure it reached the person who could make decisions. The CEO looked at Mason. Why did you deny the trip? He gave a tired smile. Optics, budgets. We have to be disciplined. And frankly, sending an operations manager across the country for hand-holding? It was a domestic flight, I said quietly. 2 days. The cost of one team building happy hour A, director near the end of the table cleared his throat. Enough. He turned to the CEO. What do we need to do right now? The CEO stared at the letter, then at me. Draft an immediate response, he said. From me. Not a form email. A call today. A plan by morning. He shifted to the lawyer. Prepare a temporary authority memo that places Ms. Ward as point for Soliton execution for the next 30 days. Back to me. You'll have what you need. Travel, approvals, resources. No more PTO games. Mason's chair creaked. You can't just cut me out of my own account. It's not your account, the CEO said, voice flat. It's the company's. And right now the company needs someone Soliton will answer. He turned to me again. Can you be at Soliton tomorrow? Yes. Take Priya, he added. Whatever you ask for, she gets. Priya lifted her gaze, surprise flashing into something like relief. We'll make a list, she said. The CEO closed the letter, squared it with the edge of the table. We'll reconvene in 72 hours, he said. Bring back a path to calm. I stood. My hands weren't shaking. I noticed that. Mason avoided my eyes. As I walked back to my seat, he muttered, low enough to pretend it wasn't for me. "Enjoy your vacation." I slipped the duplicate letter into my tote. "It won't be one," I said. On my way out, the lawyer caught my arm. "Thank you," he said simply. No flourish, just the thing itself. It landed deeper than praise. In the elevator, Priya pressed the button for the lobby and stared at our reflections in the chrome. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm tired," I said, "but I'm done being invisible." We rode down in quiet. Somewhere above us, slides were still frozen on relationship excellence. Below, a client was waiting for someone to act like the word meant something. The following morning, my alarm went off at 5. I'd barely slept, my mind running through scenarios. What questions Soliton would ask, what proof they'd demand, what promises I could make without overstepping. My suitcase sat by the door, a plain black carry-on packed with 2 blazers, flats, and the duplicate folder I wasn't letting out of sight. When I reached the office, Priya was already there. She had 2 coffees balanced in one hand, her laptop bag in the other. "You ready?" she asked, handing me the stronger one. "As ready as I'll ever be." We drove to the airport in silence, each of us scrolling through emails, flagging the newest complaints in red. By the time the plane lifted off, my inbox had 4 more. 1 order late, 1 invoice error, 2 escalations, all Soliton. By noon, we were in a rented sedan, the kind with the smell of disinfectant baked into the upholstery. Soliton's campus was spread over 3 squat buildings with mirrored glass, surrounded by a parking lot full of pickup trucks and a few weary sedans. No glossy headquarters, no fountain out front, just quiet efficiency. Marin met us in the lobby. She shook Priya's hand, then mine. Her grip was firm, her eyes sharper than I remembered. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I wasn't sure your company would take us seriously." "They should have," I answered. "We do." She led us through the plant. The air smelled faintly of ozone and machine oil. We walked past workers in navy coveralls, some nodding as we passed, others too focused on their consoles. Every few minutes, Marin stopped to point out an issue. A shipment delayed by customs, a calibration sensor overdue, a replacement part they'd been waiting on for 6 weeks. I scribbled everything down. Priya typed as fast as her fingers allowed. At one point, Marin stopped in front of a pallet half-wrapped in plastic. "This order was due to ship out Tuesday. It's Thursday." I checked the tag. The carrier had signed in, but no pickup. "Driver shortage," I said. "I'll call dispatch myself." "See?" she said quietly. "This is why we asked you to come." After the tour, we sat in a windowless conference room with a humming HVAC unit and a coffee pot that had seen better years. Marin opened a binder, thick with tabs. "Here's our reality," she said. "We like your company. We've worked together a long time, but every delay costs us credibility. We can't afford to explain to our clients why we're stuck waiting on parts you promised." I nodded. "Understood." She flipped to a page marked in red. "This is the last quarter we'll tolerate without guarantees." We're not bluffing. Starkline is courting us aggressively. Oren has already run a pilot order. Both are hungry and both are offering terms. My chest tightened. "What would it take to keep you?" Marin leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Commitment. Not just emails. Not just promises. A contract with penalties that hurt if you fail. A person on our account who answers, no matter the hour. And the sense that when we speak, someone listens." I glanced at Priya, then back at Marin. "We can draft a contract with service-level guarantees. We'll assign a dedicated escalation path. Me and Priya, directly. If there's a miss, you'll know who's responsible." She studied me for a long moment. "Do you actually have the authority to make that promise?" I hesitated, then told the truth. "Not officially. But I have the attention of our CEO. You gave me that with your letter. He's listening now." Something softened in her expression. Just a little. Good. Because we won't wait long. That night, Priya and I sat in the hotel bar, papers spread out between empty glasses of water. She rubbed her temples. If we don't get leadership to sign this, it's over. You know that, right? I know. She gave a dry laugh. Funny how a $1,500 trip is the line between stability and collapse. It's never about the money, I said. It's about whether they think you're worth showing up for. The next morning, we met Soliton again and walked through a draft framework. They asked questions, pushed back on penalties, circled deadlines in thick red ink. By the end, we had the outline of an agreement. Not signed, not binding, but solid enough to prove intent. Maren closed her binder. We'll wait to see if your company stands behind you. If they do, we'll stay. If they don't... She didn't need to finish the sentence. On the flight home, Priya leaned against the window, eyes closed. I sat rigid, folder in my lap, mind racing through what came next. The CEO had given me temporary authority, but Mason wasn't finished. I could feel it. He'd find a way to spin this, to claim the trip was reckless, unnecessary. He'd stand in front of the board and say relationship excellence until someone believed him. I stared out the window at the patchwork fields below, the clouds casting long shadows. For the first time in years, I wasn't just a fixer patching holes. I was the hinge. The one decision that would decide whether we kept our biggest client or watched them walk. And I knew exactly how Mason would react when he realized it wasn't his hands on the hinge anymore. The boardroom was colder than usual, or maybe it was me. I sat at the long mahogany table with my folder resting on my lap, while Mason prowled at the front, laser pointer flashing across another slide full of upward arrows and empty words. Legacy partnerships are rock solid, he boomed. Soliton is locked in. 2 more years, minimum. I gripped the folder tighter. 2 more years? He hadn't even read the draft agreement Priya and I had hammered out in that windowless room. He was bluffing with nothing but confidence and recycled bullet points. Then the courier walked in. Tan envelope in hand. Confidential, addressed to the CEO. The room hushed as he handed it over. The CEO unfolded the letter. His jaw tightened as he read. The lawyer leaned over, scanning the page. A minute later, his voice cut through the silence. Where is she? Every head turned. I set the folder on the table and stood. My chair scraped back, echoing in the stunned quiet. I'm here. Mason blinked like he'd been slapped. Ellen? What are you doing? The CEO slid the letter toward me. Do you have something to add? I opened my folder. Inside were copies of the draft framework Priya and I had prepared with Soliton. I laid them out, page by page, in front of the CEO. 2 weeks ago, Soliton warned us. They're done with excuses. They wanted someone present, someone accountable. Mason denied the trip. Mason's face flushed. Because it was unnecessary. It wasn't unnecessary. I cut in, voice steady. It was survival. I went anyway. On my own time, on my own dime. Priya came too. We met with Maren and her team. This, I tapped the draft agreement, is the only reason they haven't already signed with Starkline. The lawyer picked up the papers, reading quickly. His brow furrowed, then eased. This matches the letter, he said quietly. Intent to continue, contingent on signed guarantees. The CEO's gaze sharpened. And you're telling me this trip was denied by Mason? Mason sputtered. I thought it was a vacation. $1,500 wasted. $1,500, I repeated, to secure a client worth 30% of our revenue. That's the price you thought was too high. The silence was heavy, broken only by the faint buzz of the overhead lights. One of the board members cleared his throat. If she hadn't gone, they'd be gone already, I said. Orders shifted. Contracts signed with competitors. We'd be discussing losses today, not possibilities. The CEO leaned back, eyes never leaving me. You risked this on your own? I swallowed hard. I didn't see another choice. They needed someone to listen. I chose to listen. Mason tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. She overstepped. She doesn't have authority. The lawyer cut him off. Authority or not, she has results. Saladin's letter makes that clear. The CEO closed the folder slowly, like he was sealing something permanent. Then he turned to Mason. You assured me Saladin was secure. You dismissed a critical request. You nearly cost us our largest client. Mason's mouth opened, then closed. His confidence, that endless performance, crumbled under the weight of the silence. The CEO shifted his gaze back to me. Ellen, you saved this partnership. At your own expense, I nodded once. My throat was tight, but I held his gaze. I did what needed to be done. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the CEO tapped the folder. You'll take point on finalizing this agreement. Effective immediately, Mason tried again, desperation leaking into his tone. You can't be serious. She doesn't... Enough. The CEO snapped. I want results, not excuses. The meeting moved on, but for me it had already ended. My hands shook slightly as I gathered my papers, sliding them back into the folder. I wasn't smiling. Not yet. But something in me had shifted. For years I'd been invisible, the quiet fixer in the corner. Now, my name was spoken in the room where decisions lived. Later that night, I sat in my kitchen, the same table where I'd stared at that first letter in silence. My dog dozed at my feet. I poured a glass of water, looked at my reflection in the dark window, and let the reality settle in. It hadn't been about a trip. Not really. It was about what it meant to be valued, about how easily people like Mason confuse silence with weakness or thrift with wisdom. $1,500. That was the hill he chose to stand on. And in the end, it cost him everything. My name never made the slides. Not once. 6 years building the quiet engine under the company's glitter, and every deck said R&D excellence like a memorial to a team that never had faces. It wasn't rage that hooked into me. It was the slow realization that I was being erased in real time, pixel by pixel, while everyone nodded along to buzzwords like they were oxygen. The day my boss, Aaron, laughed, "Dumbass, you should have read the fine print." While firing me on stage, people actually clapped. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I asked the general counsel to read Clause 4B, and his face went the color of printer paper. We'll get there. But first, you have to understand how quiet theft sounds. It started with an invite that never arrived. Then 2. Then 5. Meetings I'd hosted for years were optimized to include impact stakeholders, which somehow meant everyone but me. My access to the investor dashboard timed out for the first time in years. Must be a permissions glitch, Aaron said, flashing the smile of a man who thinks charisma is a job description. The same week, a new co-lead materialized. Nate, who once asked me if an API was like a USB for the internet. You'll love working with him, Aaron said, patting Nate like a golden retriever who dragged in a dead bird. He brings fresh energy. Fresh energy in our office meant brunch with Aaron and a brand new hoodie with the company logo in a disruptive font. In the first product sync, Nate called the anomaly router the error vacuum. Everyone laughed. I wrote the anomaly router. It kept entire hospitals from misclassifying critical spikes. No one asked me to explain it. There's a kind of power in being overlooked. You can hear the jokes no one edits. You can see the emails no one thinks you'll read. On the way back from a culture council, I heard Aaron tell legal over sparkling water, "We need a symbolic change before the shareholder meeting. A clean narrative, torch passing. Preferably with applause." I didn't pause. I didn't slam doors. I asked legal to pull my file so I could update my estate planning. Estate planning. Such a polite phrase for sharpening knives. I'd negotiated hard in the chaos of our 2019 pivot, when everyone was begging to have their underwater options repriced. People skimmed, I annotated. People rushed, I stayed late. People said, "We'll fix the language later." I insisted on fixing the language now. That's when I tucked a sentence into a bland section with a blander title. Section 4, B, 4 characters and a letter that would one day move mountains. Meanwhile, the PR parade got louder. Aaron posed with clients in front of diagrams I built. Nate demoed my pipeline with the confidence of a man who believes the save button writes the code. I didn't fight the current. I swam under it. I cataloged everything. Git logs with my handle on every core commit. Review notes in Confluence with my initials stamped like fingerprints. Patent drafts with my name first among inventors. Not vanity. Insurance. Corporate warfare isn't fought with feelings. It's fought with paper. Paper decides who gets a farewell cupcake and who gets the company, whether they know it or not. When the first rumor hit my inbox, leadership changes at the summit, brace for impact. I wasn't surprised. I was ready. I visited Ray in legal with a coffee and a smile, said I was just clarifying a clause from my attorney. Ray's the gentle kind of GC, the kind who tries not to look bored when people misuse the word indemnify. He opened the PDF. I watched his eyes travel down the paragraph I'd highlighted long ago. He didn't flinch. "Still in effect," he said. "Unusual, but approved." I nodded like he'd told me the weather. Unusual. Approved. 2 words that fit in a single breath and could gut evaluation. The next all hands featured a montage. Our logo pirouetting over stock footage of city skylines, slow-motion handshakes, the word agility in a font that looked expensive. Aaron narrated about leaning in and leveling up, which apparently meant I wasn't invited to leadership stand-ups anymore. Nate DM'd me. Thinking we should rebrand the Anomaly stack as Nate AI? Thoughts? I typed back, "Love it. Make sure to list all contributors." He sent a rocket emoji. I saved the screenshot in a folder named Documentation. Yes, really. I didn't march into HR. HR writes the epilogue. I write the plot. Quietly, I exported every document I had authored, just my work, nothing more, into a neatly labeled archive. I didn't need a crowbar. I needed receipts. I backed up the design schematics, the data maps, the fallback logic, everything I had materially contributed to. Every timestamp was a bead on a wire. That's when Aaron started practicing his smile in the reflective glass outside the boardroom. He loves to wink when he lies. "We're going to honor legacies," he told the camera crew. "We're building the next era." He didn't say my name. He never did. If you don't write your own record, someone will write you out of it. The night before the summit, I stood in my kitchen and practiced 2 sentences. Not a speech. Speeches beg for validation. Sentences close doors. I timed the breath between them. Calm, not dramatic. Precision, not performance. I wasn't preparing to be brave. I was preparing to be inevitable. They thought applause could erase signatures. They mistook silence for surrender. They never checked the fine print. And the fine print had my name on it. The ballroom smelled like burnt coffee and money. Rows of chairs lined up in perfect symmetry. Shareholders in suits too tight for their waistlines, shifting papers and checking phones. Behind the stage, screens looped the same 3 words in corporate blue. Elevate, innovate, accelerate. It was theater, nothing more. And Aaron, my boss, self-declared visionary, was the star. I sat halfway back, not because they'd assigned me there, but because no one had assigned me anywhere. My name wasn't in the program. My badge didn't list a title, just staff. A convenient way of pretending the person who'd built the foundation of the company didn't exist at all. The lights dimmed. The music swelled. Some royalty-free anthem meant to inspire courage in the face of spreadsheets. Then Aaron stepped onto the stage, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened just enough to look approachable. He had perfected this image, part Silicon Valley disruptor, part motivational speaker. He grinned into the spotlight like it belonged to him. "Today is about the future," he said, voice amplified to the ceiling. "A future powered by agility, vision, and bold leadership." I watched his hands gesture like he was shaping the air into profit. He had never written a line of code, never designed a protocol, never sat in the office past 7 o'clock fixing what junior engineers broke. But he was the one standing up there, selling my architecture like it was his. He launched into the pitch. Graphs appeared on the giant screens. Exponential growth curves, revenue forecasts, testimonials. The audience clapped at each pause, trained like seals. Then came the moment. His smile widened, and his voice dropped into what he thought was gravitas. "Every new chapter requires us to honor the past while embracing change. And today, we make that change." He turned toward me, hand extended like he was a king offering mercy. "We are saying farewell to one of our longest-serving contributors. Sarah, please stand." The spotlight swung. 100 eyes turned. Some sympathetic, most indifferent. A few confused. They hadn't realized I was still here. The applause started polite, then picked up as a few employees forced it louder. I stayed seated. Aaron chuckled, leaning into the microphone. "Come on, Sarah, stand and take a bow. You've done well, but it's time to let the next generation lead. Don't worry, we'll carry your legacy forward." Then he said it. "Dumbass, you should have read the fine print." He thought it was clever. A joke. The crowd laughed nervously, unsure if they were supposed to. My chair didn't move. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I looked up, calm, steady. "Before I go," I said, my voice cutting through the room without effort, "may I ask legal to read Section 4B of my employment agreement into the record?" The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was absolute. Ray, the general counsel, sat in the front row, already pale from too much stage lighting. His brow furrowed. He opened his laptop with slow fingers. The applause had died mid-clap. Aaron shifted on stage, caught off guard. "This isn't the time, Sarah," he said, laughing thinly. "We're celebrating." "Let's not drag contracts into this," I repeated myself. Not louder, not sharper, just final. "Section 4B, it's one paragraph. Please read it." Ray cleared his throat. His voice, usually soft, echoed against the microphones. "Section 4. B. Upon termination without cause, all intellectual property authored or materially contributed to by the employee shall revert to said employee, including but not limited to source code, technical diagrams, design schematics, and related documentation." Murmurs rippled through the room like a spark across dry leaves. A coffee cup slipped from someone's hand and hit the carpet with a dull thud. Aaron laughed again, but the sound cracked at the edges. "This is nonsense." "It's symbolic." Legal boilerplate, Ray's eyes stayed glued to his screen. He scrolled, lips pressed thin. "It's signed," he said finally, voice quiet but carrying. "Countersigned. Effective." The shareholders shifted in their seats. Phones buzzed. A few whispered, "Is this enforceable?" I sat still. Aaron's face tightened, but he pressed forward. "This company was built by a team. Not one person. We own this product. We own it." Ray shook his head slightly. "The contracts don't reference ownership by committee. They reference authorship, and every record lists Sarah as principal architect." The room tilted. I could feel it. The sudden weight of realization pressing down on every shareholder, every investor. Years of valuations, projections, IPO talk, balanced on work they no longer owned. Aaron turned back to me, smile gone. "We can negotiate. Recognition, equity, whatever you want. Let's be reasonable." I met his eyes. Steady. "You fired me. Without cause. On stage. It's absolute." That word landed heavier than any shout could have. The screens behind him flickered. The system dashboard glitched, red text flashing across what had been a clean performance metric slide. Someone near the front gasped. A tech lead pulled out his laptop, fingers trembling as he typed. Victor, the CTO, muttered under his breath, "We've lost back-end access." Then, louder, to no one in particular, she revoked the tokens. Jesus Christ. The murmurs grew into chaos. Investors stood, calling lawyers. Someone whispered, SEC implications. Another said, material IP loss. The sound of panic is unmistakable. Papers shuffling, chairs scraping, voices overlapping. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I had already won. Aaron gripped the microphone like it might anchor him, but his voice cracked. This isn't final. We'll fix it. We'll challenge it in court. Ray finally looked up, his face drained. It's final. She owns it. The applause was gone. The spotlight still burned, but the stage belonged to me now, without me even leaving my chair. The noise didn't end so much as it thinned out, like oxygen leaving a room. People were still talking, but softer, almost careful, as if the microphones could turn on them next. I stayed seated until the lights brightened, and the stage manager started whispering into a headset like a person trying to hold back a leak with her hands. Then I stood, picked up my bag, and walked toward the side aisle. A few engineers moved aside before I reached them. Not out of respect, out of uncertainty. I used to be the person they messaged at 1:13 a.m. when production threw a tantrum. Now, they didn't know if saying hi to me counted as taking a side. I didn't help them. I just nodded and kept moving. Near the exit, I passed Victor, our CTO, hunched over a laptop balanced on a stack of investor packets. He didn't look up. His fingers were frantic, then still, then frantic again. We're freezing all use of her authored components until we understand exposure. Someone from legal said over his shoulder. Do not deploy. Do not present. Do not demo. Victor swallowed. The screen reflected in his glasses made his eyes look like alarm lights. Outside the ballroom, the hallway felt colder. The hotel had overcorrected the temperature, a predictable decision in a building where the carpets cost more than most cars. Two board members stood by a potted plant, whispering with an urgency that made the leaves tremble. One said injunction, the other said valuation. Both said, how did we miss this, without moving their mouths? Ray found me near the elevators. His tie was crooked. He looked like a man who had read a sentence he wished he'd never learned to pronounce. Sarah, he said, careful, almost gentle. I need to confirm a few things. Of course, I said, but not here. We stepped into a small conference room with a table that tried to look handcrafted. He closed the door, sat, opened his laptop like it might bite him. You negotiated 4B during the 2019 restructuring, he said. No amendments, no carve-outs, no superseding terms. Correct? Correct. Your authorship is documented. Commits, design docs, filing drafts, the works. Yes. He nodded once as if that settled gravity. I've advised the executive team to suspend use of anything you authored until we secure a licensing arrangement. Short term, that means taking product offline. Long term, it means we talk. Today isn't good, I said. You terminated me without cause. That triggers the reversion. Any use now is infringement. He rubbed his forehead. I know. You'll also want to notify partners, I added. Their integrations reference my modules. Better they hear from you than from a cease and desist. He winced, then typed something into an email draft with the kind of focus people reserve for diffusing bombs. When he looked up, his expression had shifted from strained to almost grateful. Thank you for not gloating. I'm not here for theater, I said. I'm here for accuracy. He nodded again. I'll prepare a proposal. We'll be in touch. We stood. He offered a hand, then thought better of it, then offered it anyway. I shook it briefly and left. In the lobby, I sat on the edge of a marble planter and opened my phone. Messages had stacked up in messy layers. A former lead pinged me 3 words. Holy. Absolute. Legend I didn't answer. A junior engineer I'd mentored wrote, "Are we out of jobs?" I replied, "Not if your leadership makes adult decisions." She sent back a single tear emoji, then, "Thank you." I muted the thread. I ordered a car. While I waited, I looked up at the hotel's glass facade. The reflection threw back a version of the city that looked clean and orderly. It wasn't. Nothing real is. That's the lie that gets people to sign whatever is handed to them. That's the lie that kept my name off slides and my work under other people's voices. In the car, the driver asked if I'd been at the conference. I said yes. He asked if it went well. I said, "It ended, honestly." He laughed like I'd made a joke and focused on merging. At home, I changed out of the dress I'd chosen because it had pockets deep enough to hold a USB drive. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop, the personal one, the one with the sticker that says "Document Everything." The folder I'd built over the last year sat exactly where I left it. Timestamps, drafts, commit hashes, review threads, PDF exports, receipts, all of them. The kind that doesn't get louder when you shout, just heavier when you look. An email slid in from an investor I barely knew, a man who always managed to be near cameras. "If you're taking meetings," he wrote, "we'd love to talk." I archived it. Another from a hospital vendor. "We rely on your anomaly router for our nightly batch. Should we pause?" I wrote back, "Contact your legal. Request assurance of licensed use. If they don't have it, pause." It wasn't revenge. It was responsible. Then Aaron called. His name lit the screen with a familiarity that felt like an allergy flare. I let it ring out. He called again. On the 3rd try, I picked up. "Sarah," he said, breathless, "we can fix this." I said some things I shouldn't. "You fired me in public." I misspoke. "We're prepared to offer recognition. A bonus, maybe a title." "You can't buy back authorship." I said, "You can license it. Or you can stop using it." "You'll kill the company," he said, and the mask fell just enough for the fear to show. "Think about the team." I am thinking about them. They deserve leadership that reads. He exhaled, long and loud, like a man trying to blow out a fire with hope. "Our PR is drafting a statement. Can we say you're moving on amicably?" "You can say whatever you want," I said, "but say it with a license agreement attached." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Small. I didn't think you'd actually do it." I wrote it down so I wouldn't have to. After we hung up, I sent one email, a short plain note to Ray. Subject line, "Next steps." 3 sentences. I listed a timeline for a temporary license, the rate for an interim period, and a reminder that continued use without agreement would require me to protect my rights. No threats, just terms. I closed the laptop and let the kettle whistle itself out. In the quiet, I finally felt tired. Not triumphant, not vindicated. Tired. 6 years had condensed into a single paragraph and the discipline to say it out loud. People call that courage. It isn't. It's paperwork. The morning after the shareholder summit, my inbox looked like a crime scene. Dozens of unread emails, half of them flagged urgent, the other half full of words like clarification, licensing, and exposure. I brewed coffee strong enough to sting my eyes and opened the first one. It was from a hospital client. "Our integration is throwing errors. Legal says we can't deploy until contracts are cleared. We need guidance." I read it twice, then closed the laptop. That was the new reality. Everything waited on me. For years, I was told my work was invisible, replaceable, the scaffolding no one noticed. Now, that scaffolding was missing, and the building leaned without it. My phone buzzed. A message from Maya, one of the engineers I'd mentored when she was fresh out of college. "They're panicking. Half the team is locked out of systems. Can you talk?" I typed back, "I can't step in." "You know why, but you'll be okay. You always were." Her reply was instant. "Not without you." I let the screen go dark. I couldn't fix everything for them. That was the hardest part, reminding myself that protecting my work didn't mean carrying the company on my back anymore. Around noon, Ray, the general counsel, called. His tone was steady, professional, but edged with exhaustion. "Sarah, we need to move fast. The board wants a licensing proposal on their desks by tomorrow morning. If we don't, they'll consider an injunction, and I'd rather not waste months in litigation. Can you meet?" I agreed, but only on neutral ground. A cafe downtown with unreliable Wi-Fi and strong espresso. When I arrived, he was already there, tie loosened, laptop open but untouched. He looked up like a man hoping for mercy. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I'm not here to fight," I replied, sitting down. "But I'm not here to give anything away either." He nodded. "We're clear on ownership. You negotiated it, you documented it, and the board confirmed it last night. No one's contesting that. But we need terms." I slid a folder across the table. Paper, not digital. Short-term license for critical clients. 90 days. After that, renegotiation or rebuild from scratch. Rates are here. He flipped through the pages, lips tightening as he read. "These numbers are high." "They're market," I said. "Maybe higher than you're used to paying internally, but you don't own it internally anymore. You're a client now." His hand stilled on the folder. He didn't argue. He just closed it slowly and said, "I'll take this to the board." We drank our coffee in silence after that. When I left, I felt something I hadn't in years. Air that actually reached my lungs. That evening, Aaron called again. I let it go to voicemail. His message was longer this time, almost rambling. He talked about legacy, about how much he'd valued my contributions, how things had gotten miscommunicated. Then his voice dropped, low and sharp. "Don't ruin us, Sarah." Think about the people depending on this company. I replayed that line twice. "Don't ruin us." As if I had swung the axe. As if I hadn't spent 6 years building the tree while he carved his initials into it. I opened my laptop and scrolled through the documentation again. Not because I doubted myself, but because I needed to feel the weight of it. Git logs with my initials on every commit. Patent drafts with my name listed first. Architecture diagrams signed and dated. Pages and pages of revision notes in my handwriting. It was overwhelming, almost too much. But it was mine. Every line a fingerprint. The next day, the board met me in a small conference room at their downtown office. No cameras, no applause, no stage lights. Just a long table, a row of tired faces, and Ray at the end with my folder. One of the older board members cleared his throat. "Sarah, we've reviewed your proposal. 90 days at these rates is disruptive. But litigation is worse. We're prepared to accept Aaron was there too, sitting stiffly at the far end. He didn't speak until the papers were signed. Then he leaned forward, voice quiet enough that only I could hear. "You'll regret this. Burning bridges never ends well." I looked at him, steady. "I didn't burn it, Aaron." "You set the match. I just made sure it landed where it belonged." For once, he had no reply. That night, I walked home instead of taking a car. The city lights were sharp, the air brisk. Every step felt like a chapter turning, not because I had destroyed something, but because I had protected what was already mine. People think revenge feels like fireworks. It doesn't. It feels like paperwork signed in silence. It feels like leaving a room knowing the record finally matches the truth. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming about being erased. 90 days looks long on paper and short in real life. Day one after the license, the company issued a statement with soft words and hard omissions. Transition, strategic clarity, mutual respect. My name appeared once, spelled correctly, followed by former. That was new. Accuracy in public, at least for a sentence. The money hit my account the next morning. First installment for the temporary license. Clean, clinical, and exactly on time. Ray sent a brief confirmation and a list of dates for joint reviews. We would meet weekly to validate the scope of what they could legally touch, what they had to quarantine, and what they needed to rebuild. The calls were quiet. No one tried to charm their way out of language anymore. We talked in definitions and changelogs. It suited me. Inside the company, the visible fallout wasn't fireworks. It was smaller. The product page quietly updated to limited availability. The press tour postponed. A roadmap slide with the word re-architecture where next gen used to be. I heard through Maya that Aaron had stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on vision, which is what companies say when the board asks someone to stop touching the controls. Victor stayed. He was too entangled to be replaced quickly. The team split into two groups. One to keep the licensed components running for critical clients, another to start a parallel stack that didn't use any of my work. They called it Greenfield. It was really brownfield with better lighting. Maya texted me after her first week on the rebuild. It's slower than anyone admits. But it's clean. We're documenting from day one I sent a thumbs up and nothing else. She didn't need me to narrate her competence. She'd always had it. I met with 3 companies that month. Not because I needed a job. The license gave me space. But there's a difference between leaving and landing. The first 2 slid glossy slides across tables and described cultures that sounded suspiciously like mine had on its best day. I passed on both. The third invited me to a conference room with no pitch deck and asked practical questions. How do you structure code ownership to survive reorgs? What does healthy authorship credit look like? What would you refuse to compromise? I liked that last one. I answered carefully. They listened without blinking. I didn't say yes that day, but I stopped looking. Week 5, a hospital CIO asked to speak with me directly. Their overnight batch had stabilized under the license, but they were nervous about the next quarter. Is it safe to keep building on this? He asked. Honest, plain. I told him the truth. Safe for now if they follow the agreement. Safer long-term if they migrate to a stack their leadership understands. He sighed. That's what I thought. He thanked me for answering without selling him anything. Aaron called once more, mid-license. He didn't leave a message. I didn't call back. There are some conversations that only exist to reopen doors you've already closed. A week later, HR sent a form asking for my preferred wording on an exit announcement. I replied with one sentence. Sarah served as principal architect for the enterprise platform from 2018 to 2024. They published it as written. Another small correction to the record. At home, my life got quieter in ways I didn't expect. No more 11:37 p.m. Quick questions? No more waking up to 12 Slack pings and an apology. I started running in the mornings. The park smelled like wet grass and leaf mold and not at all like a server room. I found myself thinking in terms of architecture less and time more. It didn't make me sentimental. It just gave me space to put things where they belonged. On the final week of the license, Ray and I met in person. No entourage. Just 2 people who had both spent a year living inside one paragraph and were finally stepping out of it. We're going to extend the license for 30 days, he said, handing me a light packet. The rebuild is real but not ready. We'd prefer not to rush cutovers for the hospitals. I read the terms. Fair, narrow, specific. 30 days, I said, tapping the date. No more. He nodded. No more. He hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, Sarah, this changed how we draft employment agreements, how we read them too. It should, I said. That's the whole point. He smiled without showing teeth and left. I signed the extension and walked 3 blocks to the office of the third company, the one that asked about refusal points. They hadn't decorated the lobby to look like the internet. No neon verbs on walls. Just books, real ones, and a pot of coffee that tasted like someone cared. The VP of product met me at the door and didn't pretend we'd always known each other. We've been building slowly, he said. On purpose. We want ownership to mean responsibility. not possession. What would my title be? I asked. Name it, he said. Then write what it means. I took a breath and named something small on purpose. Principal engineer. No chiefs, no global, no anything you can't print on a card without rolling your eyes. He nodded like I'd passed a test he hoped I'd pass. We talked about process, authorship, credit, and what to do when people forget what those words mean. I didn't say yes in the room. I waited until I was outside in the clean air, then emailed 3 words. I'm coming Monday. The license ended exactly 30 days later. The company cut over clients to their new stack. It was slower at first, and it didn't have the features I'd polished into muscle memory. But it was theirs, and they could say that honestly. Maya sent me a photo of her team eating bad cake in a good mood. The caption, "No more borrowed parts." I wished them well and meant it. If there's a lesson to drag into the light, it's not that fine print saves you, or that the law will always be fair, or that a single clause can fix a broken culture. It won't. The lesson is simpler and harder. Put your name on your work, read what you sign, and keep your proof. People will call that combative. It isn't. It's maintenance. It's the boundary that lets you build without being erased. When people ask me what revenge felt like, I tell them it never did. What I felt was relief. The quiet kind that arrives when the record finally matches the truth. The applause ended. The paperwork stayed. And I kept walking.